This is the second part of our constraint layout videos. If you remember, in the previous part we looked at constraint layouts and we talked about views or elements that we put inside constraint layout, and those elements were only depending on the parent or the container that is containing them. And this is our constraint layout that we are having at the moment. As you can see, I've already created it. So I'm going to go to the design part, and then I'm going to get another element, and I'll just drag and drop it here. Everyone, I hope, can do this at this point. So this element does not have any constraint at the moment. As you can see here, there's even warning. This element does not have any constraint. So I can either add a constraint by simply clicking here, then mean that this constraint has been added this side, and if I add this one, also this constraint will be added to this side. So that's also another way of adding adding constraint. I can also remove it by simply clicking on X here and click on this X, then the constraint will be removed. Or I can add all the constraints by simply clicking here on this one, info constraints. So if I click on info constraint, the Android Studio will define for me the best places that it thinks. The Android Studio will define for me the best places that it thinks it will be better for me to place my constraints. I can still go ahead and remove them. Okay, let me first add this one. For example, I have those constraints. If I want to remove all the constraints, I can simply click on this, remove or clear all constraints, and it will be able to do what? To clear all the constraints that I have on on my view. Now let us go back to the source code by simply clicking here, and we'll be able to see the source code. As you can see, this is a simple button. It is having the absolute editor of X and Y because we have not put any constraint for the X-axis and the Y-axis. So to summarize up what we looked at in the previous video, we had only a single view, and this view was depending to the constraints of its parent. You remember, because we could do like this, and that's a parent constraint, and that's another parent constraint. You can see here the end, it means that this constraint end of constraint, and this one also constraint in to start constraint, and it is also the it also depends on on the parent container. If you want to reference to the container that is containing this, you just say parent, then it will know that you're meaning this one. So I'll remove these constraints by simply deleting them like that. And today we are going to look at, in case you want more than one view in your layout and you want other constraints to depend on other views. So to do that, I'll simply go back to I can either copy this and duplicate it. Okay, let me do that way. I don't want you to get used only on drag and drop. So let me come here and just copy this button and then paste it. So it means that we're going to have two buttons at the moment. I paste it here, but what you should know that we have two buttons here. Okay, let me put here the button 1 and here button 2. So we have button, okay, let me put here button 1, and here on the bottom I put button 2. But what you can see, there is a warning. We have repeated the IDs. Okay, so I have to change the IDs. For example, I can change one to button 1, and this one I have to change it to button 2, because every element must have a single ID in the place. So what you should notice, another thing that you should notice is that the button 2, or the button that is under or that is following the first button, this button 2, is the one that is on top of the previous button that we had. It means that if I get this button and I add it on and I move it to top, it means that this button 1 will be the one that will appear on top. So the button that follows does not regard or does not depend on any other button if you don't define its constraint. And that's why you see that this second button that follows this first button, it feels like there is no any button behind it, and that's why you see it is being placed on top, or it is appearing on top of the previous button. So after finishing that, I hope you've understood that what is meant. Like, the button that follows will assume that there is nothing behind it because there's no any constraint, and it will appear and on top of the previous button that was defined before, because they assume there's nothing. So if you move this button below, you'll find that there's also another button on bottom. So just like what I said, that previously we were just referencing to the what? We were referencing to the main container. But also there's another way that we can reference to the buttons themselves. So to do that, let me first create the third button here. So I'll just copy this and then I paste that third button here, and I'll give this button ID 3, and then I come also change this one to button 3. So we have 3 buttons in place. I can as well move this one here and move this one here and move this one here. Previously I've not given this any button a constraint so far. So we're going to create constraint for these buttons. This one has already given it to itself. So what we're going to do, we are going to make this button now to relate to themselves, not to relate to the to the container. Previously we were relating them to the parent container, but right now we want this button to be responsive according to the position of other buttons. To do that, let me first remove this constraint. This constraint is automatically giving to themselves. Okay, so let us begin. So I'm going to make one button to depend on the other. For example, this button, I'm going to make it depend on giving itself the constraints. I can just simply click here and then it will be deleted, and then I click also on this constraint and also it will be deleted, and this one be deleted, and this one be deleted. Okay, my point is I want this button to depend on myself, on themselves, or not on the on the parent. So let me go back. Now let us begin. Like, I want this button to be on, this button to depend on this one. Like, it should not pass this one. So since what I'm trying to say, like, this constraint should depend on this one, not on the layout, on the container. So to do that, I'll simply click here, and then okay, before I do that, let us first see this is our button 2. This is our button 2. Our button 2 is here. Okay, so these are the constraints that we have. We have the absolute X and the absolute Y, because I've not defined any constraint, and you know what they mean. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make this button to relate to the button 3 by simply moving my constraint there. So I want us to observe what is going to happen when I release this mouse. So if I release the mouse, you'll see that there is a constraint input that has been added here, which is layout constraint top to bottom of. You see, layout constraint top to bottom of. Previously this one was parent, the attribute value. So this one means that this button 2, its top will always be on the bottom of button 3. That's why I see I'm referencing the ID of the button 3. So it means that this one, its bottom will always be on, its top will always be under the button. It will always be related to the to the button 3. So I mean that if I'm to give, for example, margin, the margin is a space between 2 different elements. For example, if I say margin top and I say maybe 100 dp, that margin top will be related to this one, to this button 3. If I move it over here, you see it cannot allow me to move and go beyond this one. Why? Because we have put a condition, we have put a constraint. We have put a constraint and say this one will always be under button 3. That's why if I try to move it on top, it cannot cross that. So if you're to make a certain item to always be under a certain button, a certain element, that's how we can do it. Okay, so I can also, and one thing that I want to tell you, that you cannot use the x-axis element to be related to the y-axis element. For example, these are x-axis constraints. I cannot use this one and I come and relate it to the y-axis constraint. That's why you see if I try to move over my constraint here, it's not active, but it is only active when I try to point it at at the y-axis, at the x-axis constraint. So it means that the x-axis constraint are for the x-axis constraint and the y-axis constraint are just for the y-axis constraints. So let me delete this constraint. but I hope you've got that point. Like if I want this button to always be on under this one, I just simply put that constraint and say that it is always on the bottom of this one, and then it will be able to do what? To be placed under the bottom. So I can also put this one here below it, and then if I want this one to always be in line, so I can make this one to be in to be at the left to the parent, also this one to be the right to the what? To the parent. So as you can see, those attributes that they have been put in that place. So I'm going to make this one to be always under this. So whatever I said here, you can see the concept that has been introduced is that let me first undo and so that you can see it properly. So I'm going to move this one under this one, this constraint. So you can see this one is always going to be under the bottom of this one. So it means that it will never, even if I move it down, it will always, the bottom of this one will always be on top, or the bottom of this one will always be on top of the bottom of this one. So it can move up, but it will never move on the bottom of this constraint. So if I also this one, if I want it also to be under the bottom of this one, I can also simply bring this one to be under the bottom. So it means that this one is the one that will control them, this constraint. If it collapses on top, it will go on top, and if it collapses on bottom, it will always go in the bottom. So that's how we can relate constraints, and we make them to be always in line, you see, and they're always in line. So it means that if I also it means that if this button 3 and button 2, they'll always be responsive according to the to the button 1. So that's how we can relate one button, or I mean one view or one element to the other using using constraints. Previously we looked at how we can relate always to the to the container, or the main container, or the main layout. But in this video we have seen that we can also relate like set constraints according to the to the other layouts. For example, I cannot be able to do to move this one to this side if in case I put this constraint and I say this constraint should always be left to this one. So I've said that this button 2, it should always be left to this one by just putting this constraint. So it means that even if I move this one, they cannot allow me, I'm not allowed to move it beyond this. You see, I can move it on this side, but if I move to the left side, I'm not allowed. Why? Because I put this constraint that says it is always going to be at the end of the button 1. Okay, it's going to be the start of this button. You see this one, it says the start of the button is always going to be at the end of this button. So it means that I cannot go, this means the end, this is the last part. So it means that I cannot go less than that. I can also set, but you see, if I go, it can allow me to go this side. So if I want also not to go this button to always be between, but how will I do? I'll just simply set it to this constraint. I just get it as constraint. Let me remove it, because right now it is depending on the parent. You see, this constraint is depending on on the parent. So I click on it, I delete the constraint, and then if I put the constraint and say then it should be always on it should be always I mean the end. Okay, just see, I can say the end of this constraint should be always and the start of this constraint. So how do I do that? I can just simply move this one. Then you see this constraint will be will be introduced, like the end to the end of this button 3, I mean button 2 button 3 will always be the start of the button 2. So it means that this button 2, it cannot also go beyond here, so it is always going to be in between there. And why can't it go in bottom? Because these constraints that I put this one, unless I remove this and I remove this, and then you'll find that it can go on bottom. So you'll find it is very interesting. I mean, it is a little bit confusing, but if you keep on practicing, you'll find it interesting and get used of it. So if you look at them before you practice them, they'll look a little bit confusing, but once you understand this simple constraint, the bottom of then you specify whether parent or what, then you or you put the specific ID, the start of, then the end of, and the top of. Just it is bottom, end, top, and start. I repeat, this is start, this is top, this is end, and this is bottom. So once you understand those terms, and then you can relate to two different things. You can either relate to the parent, you see, you can either relate to the parent, or you can relate to another element which has an ID that is already defined. So once you understand those things, you can be able to position anything, any element in any place, and give it any constraint with your own rules in any time, or in any way that you want. So at that point, I'll stop from there. I'm going to get another example that I can use to introduce something new to you in the constraints. So I'm going to comment this, or I can just simply delete them, but I've commented them, no problem. That when you will be able to download this code, you'll see what I practiced. I'll put the code in the description of this video, the link to this code. So what else? I'm going to show you another way how you can deal with these constraints. I'm going to get an image. That's the best way to practice what I want to show you. I'm going to get an image by simply double clicking here on image and then drag and drop it here. So I'll just select an image, and then if I select this one, if we go in source code, this is nothing but it's an image view. It's an image view, and at this moment this image view has no any constraint at the moment, but it's just, this is an image button. I put an image button. I thought I'm putting image view. Okay, it's also the same, just no difference. I can change it to view. In fact, if you're still new, most of the time we shall not use drag and drop. Most of the time we shall be typing the code by ourselves. Okay, so this is just an image view, and it is having an ID. I'm going to call just image view. That's going to be its ID, image view. So once I create that image view, I'm going to add another image view by either simply duplicating this one, or I'll not duplicate it, just let me come here and drag and drop it. So I'll come here, come to widgets, then come to images. I'll drag and drop this image here. So I'll select which image I want to present. Let me get a little bit different image. Let me get a little bit different image. Okay, this one will work for us. Okay, so I have this image. So let me move this image. I'm going to change its width and height. Okay, let me first specify the width and height of this one. So I can click here, and then I'll be able to specify the width and height under these attributes. So I can say this one is 200 dp. We shall explain the meaning of dp in the coming lectures, and I can also change this one to 200 dp. So that's a square image of 200 dp and 200 dp. 200 dp is too huge. Let me make it 150, and this one 150. Okay, so this second image, I'm also going to give it width of 100 dp and also 100 dp. So I'm going to make this image to the constraint to depend on this one always. So if I want to do that, I can first make this one its constraint to depend on the main container, and then I'll come to this second image. I'll remove its constraint here by simply clicking on the constraint. I click on delete, or you can delete, and this one on bottom I click on delete. So after, I'm going to move this constraint and point it at the bottom of this image, and then I'll also get the second constraint and point it at the bottom of this image. Can you see that what I've made? You see? So it means that the bottom of this image should always be here, and the top of image should always be. And what I've made is that the bottom of this image should always be this image, and the top of this image should always be under this image. So what does it mean? It means that the middle is going to make half. So the middle will always be here in the between the end of the bottom of the image. So by doing that, I'll achieve this kind of property whereby I can have such an item. So if it was not an image, it can be a text view, it can be anything. And this one is on top of this. It's really very hard. It's really very hard to make this one with other kind of constraint views. Let me delete it. I can as well change this constraint to be on top, and then change also this one to be on top. So in case it was a kind of notification, you remember notification, like you have an icon here and then there is a notification number here, for example, where if you're making a e-commerce shop, there's always a e-commerce cart here, the cart, and then the number on the bottom, on the top of the cart. So if it was a view, you could have done that simply here. Even notification for Facebook and the rest, here we have an icon, and then here we have a counting number. So if they are just simple other simple views, we could have done that in a simple way like that one, just by saying that the top of this one should always be on the top, on top of this, and then its bottom should also be on top of this top, and then you'll achieve such a great view. So at the moment it can look confusing if you look at it at first, but if you practice it, you'll find it easy and interesting. So for this video, I'll stop from here. We shall keep on making more videos about constraint layouts as we understand them more and more. Watch out for the next video, and thank you for watching up to this point. See you.